Hi there. Um, Welcome to day 3 of online learning. Hope you guys are settling into it, and things are feeling good. Um, Again, if you have questions, you should sign into the Zoom meeting. I'm available online from 12:30 to 1:30, and I've invited my first round of folks to join me in tutoring tomorrow on Friday. So double check your Schoology messages to see if you should be in my tutoring block. Looking forward to seeing some of you tomorrow. Also, for the long weekend from Friday to Monday, we've assigned some reading in the course reader. You're going to need to read the chapter. There's a chapter from an AP review book on period 3 empires. So we want you to read that over the weekend. It's about 20 pages. Take notes on that. And then you'll be ready for Monday. Is going to be like a packet day, kind of review day where you work independently. Prepare to write an essay and LEQ on Tuesday. So that's all should be good. All right, today we're going to talk about period 3 empires and all the different states that exists in period 3 at the post-classical era. I'm going to keep it a little shorter than I did yesterday with Islam, so hopefully I won't ramble on too long. So let's get started. Period 3 state forms. You have to know a few of these. You don't need the same level of detail that you needed for the course previously, but our new AP World History Modern course does include period 3 state forms. So we're going to kind of go through a highlight reel of the states and some key concepts you need to know about all of them. Okay, we're going to start in East Asia. You guys remember from the classical period, it's the Qin and the Han that you studied a lot last year. And then in the post-classical, they move into the Sui, the Tang, and the Song. And for this new AP exam, you basically only need to know about the Song, but the Song continues some of the ideas that were adopted by the Han and that are continued by the Sui and the Tang. The most important of these ideas is the mandate of heaven. This is the idea that the celestial powers at B provide their benevolence to a certain ruler. So any emperor in China needs the authority of the mandate of heaven. And the mandate of heaven is a little different than absolute rule because there are things that an emperor can do if he is a poor emperor or governs the empire poorly. Then the heavens will make it known to him that he's not doing a good job. And so it's kind of a conditional position. You have to do a good job to maintain the mandate of heaven. And if you don't do a good job, well, the heavens are going to let you know. So things that might indicate to an emperor that he's not doing a good job in China could be a famine, natural disasters, earthquakes, constant warfare. And when these things happen, then it's a signal to the people that maybe the emperor needs to be changed out. And so we start to see new dynasties emerge when natural disasters and war and famine occur. But that's the basic idea of the mandate of heaven. And all of the empires in China, all of the dynasties use the mandate of heaven. Building up from the Sui and Tang, the Sui are most famous for starting the Grand Canal. So China is famous for its incredibly long, productive east-west rivers, the Yangtze and the Yellow River. And the Grand Canal was a brilliant infrastructure investment because it connected China north to south. It connected the productive farmland of the south to the government and industrial capital, well, let's say pre-industrial, but manufacturing capital in the north. So the Grand Canal is important. The mandate of heaven is important. You guys learned a lot about the civil service exam last year. And the civil service exam was used by the Sui, the Tang, and Song, and the Ming, and the Qing to determine who could work in the government. So these were great jobs, plush jobs that put your family ahead, but it was a very difficult exam. You needed resources to study for that exam and pass that exam. But if you had the opportunity to study for the exam and you passed the civil service exam, it was a chance for your family to move up. So it provided social and economic mobility. And then the civil service exam is very closely tied to Confucianism. And you know that the idea of Confucianism, the idea of patriarchy, filial piety, the relationships that you studied last year about respect to elders, respect to those, your boss, those of higher authority to you, respect to your teachers. All of that is embedded in Confucianism. And Confucianism becomes important during the Han, and it remains important in Chinese society all the way until the Communist Revolution in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. The Song dynasty holds on to all of these key aspects of Chinese society: the Mandate of Heaven, the Civil Service Exam, and Confucianism. So whenever you write about East Asian society, you should always name that they are governed by the Mandate of Heaven, Civil Service Exam, and Confucianism, all the way through until you get to communism. Until you get to Mao, anytime you write about East Asia in an essay, short answer, you should name these three state building techniques. Song Dynasty is also incredibly famous for really advancing gunpowder technology, coming up with the concept of paper money, movable type printing press. And the Song Dynasty also was the one who adapted champa rice, which is a variety of rice from Southeast Asia that you studied, and developed that champa rice for large-scale agricultural production throughout China. And as a result of that investment in champa rice and bringing champa rice from Southeast Asia into mainland China, is that an incredible population boom occurs thanks to the increased food output of champa rice. So that's what you need to know about the Song Dynasty. And I have an interesting story to tell about the paper money that the Song introduced. So when they first introduced paper money, it was very effective. It made buying and selling easier, just as we use paper money today. It makes it a lot easier if you don't have to carry around huge bags of gold or copper cash in China to buy and sell things. So paper money was a useful technology. But when the Mongol Empire arrives and conquers the Song produced way too much paper money. In fact, they produced so much paper money that it completely lost value. And they were trying to produce this money to hire more soldiers, build more weapons to fight against the Mongols. And I learned in a course that I took on ancient China that the Song Dynasty printed so much paper money that the people of China lost faith in paper money during the Song Dynasty, and they never regained faith. They never trusted paper money until basically the 1980s. That's how profound the Song paper money crisis was, which is incredible to think about. Okay, other states you need to know about in period 3. The Byzantine Empire. Two important emperors to know. Constantine is the founder of the Byzantine Empire, and then Justinian is the kind of most famous Byzantine emperor. It lasts for a long time, but the Byzantine Empire, as you remember, is a continuation of the Roman Empire. So when the Roman Empire collapses, the Byzantine Empire continues after 476, and it essentially exists as an empire because it controls trade in the Eastern Mediterranean. The capital of Constantinople is a key trading location inside the connecting the Black Sea to the Eastern Mediterranean, connecting Europe to Asia. And it's one of the most important cities in the world. And because the Byzantines control Constantinople and they built an incredibly elaborate and successful city walls around the city. It was also protected by a harbor, by a strong navy. And because they control Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire basically survives the expansion of the Umayyad and Abbasid dynasties and isn't conquered by either of those. It does eventually get conquered in 1453 by the Ottomans, and we're going to talk about why that happens, and it's thanks to some key technology that comes in period 4 next week. But Constantinople keeps the Byzantine Empire alive, and you need to remember that the Byzantine Empire is Christian, so the Byzantine Empire legitimizes Christianity. They also create law codes based on the Roman 12 tables. This is known as the Code of Justinian. So if you're writing about how did period 3 empires govern, you could say, well, they governed because they had strong centralized emperor and they created law codes like the Code of Justinian, which is a continuation of the 12 tables from the Romans. They also adopted the Romans' province system into something they called the theme system. And that's basically all you need to know about the Byzantines. So what happened in Western Europe after the Romans collapsed? In Eastern Europe, the Byzantines adopt Christianity, become a relatively strong empire, but not an expanding empire. In Western Europe, it descends into feudalism. This map kind of shows you a few of the kingdoms that form after the collapse of Rome, the Ostrogoths, the Burgundians, the Franks, the Visigoths, the Vandals, and all of these different kingdoms are decentralized and they're always fighting each other. So Western Europe is a time of constant warfare, and there's not a lot of trade happening, not a lot of libraries being built, not a lot of universities being built. So this is very different from what's happening in the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates, where trade is flourishing, where knowledge is spreading. And Western Europe descends into feudalism. And feudalism is basically a way to protect yourself in a time of constant war. And so the peasants turned to local lords for protection. Lords built castles all over, and the lords would have those castles to protect themselves, but also to protect their peasants when raiders came. So they would run into the castle if an outside invader came, a neighboring kingdom brought the knights down to attack. They would hide out in the castle, fight back, and then eventually when peace came back, they would go back out into the farms. But feudalism, it's not great for the farmers. They don't own their land. They're forced to work for the nobles. The nobles have absolute authority. The lords have absolute authority over the peasants. They can do what they want. This is where we get some of those laws we talked about as examples of absolute authority, like the law prima nocta, that the lord can sleep with a peasant's wife on the night of their marriage. Some of those laws that we kind of think about with the French Revolution, they are established during the post-classical era, during the time of feudalism. And feudalism is very hierarchical. Again, the thing to emphasize about feudalism is that it's decentralized. So there's no strong emperor. It's a lot of different kings competing for power. And this is, again, bad for trade, bad for knowledge acquisition, knowledge sharing, and it's basically bad for the economy and politics. So Western Europe this is when known as the Dark Ages, when they kind of fall behind, further behind China. They fall behind the Umayyad and the Abbasids in terms of knowledge and economy. Probably the most important period 3 empire that you need to know for the new edition of the AP course is the Mongols. And I know you've learned a lot about the Mongols. We talked about them with connection to trade. Um, the Mongols are nomadic. They come out of the steppes, so the highlands, the mountains. And because they're nomadic, it gives them a few advantages. They're incredible at horses. They're incredible with bow and arrow. They're incredible hunters, and then they leverage their ability to ride horses and to fire bows and arrows from their horses in military battle again and again. And they don't care about a lot of the things that traditional empires care about, like having strong cities. They're nomadic. They move from place to place. The Mongol was the largest land empire ever. So they are so successful at conquering most of Europe, Asia, parts of Europe. So they established the largest empire in the world. And they're able to do this in part because of their nomadic lifestyle and their location in the mountains. They had a very strong initial leader, Genghis Khan, who has had an incredible ability to unite the Mongol tribes. And he did this through marriages. He did this through political arrangements with the other Mongol tribes to unite them. And then they have a military that just no one else at the time could compete with. They utilized incredible archers. They also had a bow, a composite bow that was much more advanced than anything that the Europeans or the Abbasids had. It made it more powerful, more accurate. And the Mongols were incredible on horse. It was said that children learned how to ride horses before they learned how to walk. And that's kind of hard to imagine. I have an 18-month-old son. I can't really imagine him riding a horse all by himself right now. But if he was Mongol, he would be riding a horse now before he could walk. And they took advantage of this. They also had an incredible herd of horses. Each Mongol warrior had 4 or 5 or 6 horses at their disposal, so they could ride multiple horses in a day at full speed. And the Mongols also were so successful because they were absolutely savage to their enemies. They used fear and intimidation to conquer. The best example we have of this is when Mongols conquered and sacked Baghdad in 1258. Now, Baghdad was the most important city in the world in 1258. It was like London of the height of London in the 1900, at the peak of the Industrial Revolution and imperialism, or it was like New York today. It was the most important city in the world. It had the best literature. The House of Wisdom was truly a global university. There were people from all over Asia, including Africa and even Europe, who were studying at the House of Wisdom. And the Mongols showed up and they didn't care. And they absolutely destroyed the city. They destroyed the House of Wisdom. It was said that the Tigris and Euphrates River were so full of books and bodies that you could ride a horse across the river. And that the river ran black with the ink of manuscripts from the House of Wisdom. So it's kind of hard to imagine as a historian how much was lost with the sack of the Mongols, the sack of Baghdad by the Mongols. But it was intense. But what the sack of Baghdad allowed the Mongols to do is that then they ride on to Damascus, the capital of the Abbasid dynasty. And when they get to Damascus, the caliph just opens the doors and he says, "Come on in, we're not going to fight you. We made that mistake once." And so then a lot of the Middle East surrendered to the Mongols because they destroyed Baghdad. A couple of big benefits that come from Mongol rule. The Pax Mongolia we talked about 2 days ago. So trade flourishes. The Yasa law that protected protected merchants was in effect. And then there's some very important cultural exchange that takes place because of the Mongols. Gunpowder from China, block printing from China, transfers to the Middle East and eventually transfers to Europe during the Mongol expansion. And gunpowder is probably the most important one. The Mongols used Chinese engineers who were skilled at creating gunpowder weapons in some of their conquests, and those Chinese engineers sold their services or traded those services to the Islamic Caliphate. So the Islamic Caliphates acquired gunpowder technology, and then eventually it's going to spread to Europe. The last group we're going to talk about are the pre-Columbian American societies. Basically what you need to know for the Americas is that complex civilizations existed in the Americas before Christopher Columbus arrived. I'll say that again. Extremely complex civilizations existed in the Americas before Columbus arrived. So examples of those are the Olmec and the Chavin. These are some of the earliest complex civilizations in the Americas. The Olmecs are famous for building these huge stone heads, so advanced art and stonework technology. But the Olmecs are really an ancient civilization. Also, the Chavin down in South America and Peru were incredible goldsmiths. They built large temples. So these are the earliest examples of pre-Columbian societies. But the much more common ones that you should know about are the Aztecs. Aztecs were in Mexico. And the Aztec Empire was a short-lived empire, but because they basically aligned, they conquered and created a unified empire by conquering several different smaller kingdoms in Mexico to create a large empire. Aztecs were very famous for using human sacrifice. They're famous for their tribute systems. They demanded tribute from all of the different groups that they conquered. And the city of Tenochtitlan was one of the glorious, most advanced cities of the post-classical era. A city built in the middle of the lake that utilized Chinampas farming so they could grow vegetables, corn, all kinds of agricultural products could be grown inside of the lake. This also allowed them to protect themselves. So the lake provided a natural barrier. They could pull up the bridges and they would be very protected from outside attack. And it was an incredibly advanced city, the capital Tenochtitlan. It astounded Spanish conquistadors when they conquered. So if you want to pause the lecture and read this quote, I would do that. And the Aztecs, like other great empires, depended on trade. They invested in trade, they encouraged trade. And this map shows you just a few of the products that were being traded throughout the Aztec Empire in Mexico and Central America. The other major empire you need to know is the Inca. Inca are in South America. They have a very strong centralized government. And the Inca are amazing because they're able to build an empire in some of the most difficult mountainous terrain in the world. And how did they do that? They built road networks. Not road networks that you could take any kind of cart or a carriage on, but road networks for people on foot and for the animal of the Inca, the llama. And this map shows the incredible network of roads that the Inca built. From Quito to Talca is literally thousands of miles. It's an incredible distance. And the Inca had an incredible road network that connected all of their towns, that went through all of the mountains, and it allowed the Inca Empire to thrive. You can get a sense of here about how mountainous the Inca civilization, where they lived. I mean, this is a picture of Machu Picchu in Peru, and like those mountains are incredible. I can't imagine having a city there and then having to go across those mountains to connect to another city. But the Inca did that because they had incredible road building techniques, and they had animals. There's one here, the llama, that was great at climbing mountains and could carry goods on those mountain roads. The Inca are also famous, that we're going to remember, for their silver mines in Potosi. And the Incas used a coerced labor system known as the mita. So the mita was a form of tribute labor where villages needed to provide workers, usually for a month every year, to build the roads. And then the Spanish are going to come and they're going to co-opt that same coerced labor system and use it to exploit Incan workers to mine. And it's no longer a tax, but much more like slavery. The last thing to mention about the Inca is that they established a very unique writing system known as the quipu. This is a writing system that uses knots on strings to record numbers and ideas. Incredibly sophisticated and incredibly unique. I mentioned the mita system already, so it's a labor system, but it would have been used to build things like this bridge, to build the road networks, and that's about it. Those are the empires of period 3. You need to know a little bit about all of them, and if you ever mention one of those empires, you should have an example of something that they did to support their empire. All right, and with that, I'm going to sign off. Hopefully this is a little shorter than yesterday, and have a great evening.